if you inherit your grandpa's hammer and you break the handle and you put a new handle on it, and then you bust the head and you put a new head on it, is it still grandpa's hammer?
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. I'm your host, Keith Billik, and I'm back. I don't know how many of you saw my messages on social media saying that this episode is going to be just a little bit later than what is typical of me. I try to stick to like every 2 weeks or so. I know that gets fudged, but this one was pushed back because I took a much-needed family vacation. Try to get away from it all. Went somewhere warm, Southern California, from my home here in Michigan. I am back now, though, so I'm cold again. Don't worry. But yeah, what did I do now that I finally got a week off from the podcast? Well, I went and recorded a few more podcast episodes on my vacation from the podcast. So don't worry, it wasn't all for nothing. And I gotta say, I get to record these podcasts in a lot of different environments, and it's all pretty cool, but I think the two interviews that I did while I was on vacation were probably the two coolest podcast studios that I've ever had, and they were each a lot different. One was in an actual recording production studio on the NBC Universal studio lot. And I'll tell you a bit more about that once that episode comes up. So that was really cool, being in that building and just seeing what that's all about and being in that professional studio. The other interview I recorded, our Airbnb that we had, actually it had a pool out back, and I got some beautiful, sunny, warm Southern California days. So the other episode I did, I was sitting out by the pool. So yeah, a professional Universal Studios studio, and then poolside in Santa Monica. It was pretty rough, let me tell you. Don't ever try it. I'll take one for the team on this one. But I am happy to be back. Glad I could finally get this one out to you. Another thing I wanted to mention, and if any of you listened to that episode a few episodes ago with Derek Vaden, we talked about the Tuner Tune Thursday hashtag. And I've posted a couple videos to that hashtag, and I know Derek has kept up with it. And Jake Sheps, the great banjo player, Jake Sheps, keeps posting a few videos to that too. So it's making somewhat of a comeback, but this is my plea to all of you. I know some of you have to have banjos with detuners on them. So by all means, especially those of you who not only have the detuner equipped banjo, but also have Instagram accounts, post some videos of you playing a detuner tune, and then make sure you slap that hashtag Tuner Tune Thursday on it. We need to get some more videos going. I want to get this started for Derek. He started it, and I know he enjoys seeing what else comes up with that. So it's a lot of fun. So just a reminder about that. Yeah, make some videos. Let's see what you got. The other thing I need to do is, of course, acknowledge today's Patreon supporters of the show. And we are very fortunate to have two extremely intelligent, very good-looking Patreon supporters for today. The first one, his name is Tony Newbolt, and he just started playing the banjo recently, and he, through listening to the podcast, is discovering all sorts of new bands and musicians to check out. And Tony, for one thing, welcome to the USA. You said you just became a citizen, so congrats on that. So welcome here. Welcome to the world of banjo. You're doing everything right, and I couldn't be happier to hear that you're checking out some of the guests on the podcast. They are some of the best out there. I guarantee it. So I know you have to be enjoying that. So thanks for your support, and welcome to the club. The other supporter of today's episode is Russ Vatava. He's out in Nebraska. He's been playing for a few years and takes lessons with Kristen Scott Benson. We've had a number of Patreon supporters say that they take lessons with Kristen. I don't know if she just has a monopoly on the banjo lessons market, or if there's some sort of correlation. I would really love to know, because there is definitely that trend, and I love it, and I hope to keep it going. Russ also says he attends Midwest Banjo Camp, which a lot of you know I am typically at every year, running sound and doing banjo things. And so Russ, I hope to see you there. Thank you for your Patreon support. Anybody else who wants to become a supporter of the show, please go to patreon.com/banjopodcast, and you'll find out how to get your personal thanks and shout out on the show. Another thing that both Russ and Tony, among many other supporters, are getting is that for every episode of the show with a guest featured, there's a guy named Eli Gilbert who is just a brilliant dude at figuring out people's styles and making really cool instructional banjo videos. He makes a custom video for each of these episodes, and if you go to that Patreon page, you can figure out how to be on that list to receive those custom lessons that Eli makes, and it's usually based on whoever the guest is of that episode. He'll base it on that person's style or something to do with a skill that was maybe talked about on the episode. So that's really cool. Once again, patreon.com/banjopodcast. And if you like what Eli's doing, and I'm sure you will, make sure you go to his YouTube page and his Patreon too, and, do all the subscribe things, look into contributing to his page. He's doing really great stuff. So I know you'll like checking it out. If, however, you're unable to become a Patreon supporter, but you are looking for other ways to help the podcast, the other things to do would be to subscribe and rate on Apple Music. You could follow me on all the social medias. I'm Picky Fingers on Facebook. Oh, also on Facebook, there's a group for Picky Fingers Podcast listeners, and I think it's just called Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast listeners, fans, and friends, something like that. And it's a group. So feel free to join that group and chat about banjo stuff if you haven't quite gotten your fill yet. On Instagram, I'm picky_fingers. Follow me on that. And I don't send out too much spam. It's usually just the occasional video of me playing something, or just the episode announcements, which of course you'll want to find out about as well. Or on Twitter, I'm at Banjo Podcast. So follow me on all that stuff. Share the episode announcements. Those are all great ways to show your support of the show other than the Patreon site. Today's special guest is Clarke Wyatt. And Clarke is a banjo player and also a guitarist and all-around great musician. He's currently playing in a banjo/guitar with fiddle duo with his partner Betse Ellis. And that duo is called Betse and Clarke, and the two of them are also involved in the Short Round String Band, so you can catch him with any of those groups. He has a really interesting musical background as a keyboard player and more of an academic jazz type of musician, and also has an interesting banjo style, as it turns out. He's a fingerstyle player, but sticks to kind of a regional Ozark, more or less old-timey, with a good dose of John Hartford and Ralph Stanley thrown in. So you're going to hear him talk about all that. He's a really great guy. And not to mention, speaking of cool podcast studios, this is my second podcast recorded at the Great Lakes Music Camp on the shores of Lake Michigan. And the first podcast was the one I did with Bill Evans last year. So it was great to be back in that cabin with some of the campers at the camp, and awesome meeting Clarke. He's a great musician, great guy, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Here it is, Clarke Wyatt.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Clarke. It's been nice meeting you and hearing your music here at the Great Lakes Music Camp.
Likewise, absolutely.
Thanks, man. Tell everyone where you come from, how you got started playing the banjo, and what your early influences were.
Oh boy, cool. Well, it's an interesting and windy story. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, with my partner Betse Ellis. I'm part of a duo called Betse and Clarke, which is a fiddle and banjo and fiddle and sometimes guitar duo. And I met Betsy about 5.5 years ago now, and we weren't playing together, but we were sweethearts. So we met, but we weren't playing music together. My background is as a pianist and keyboard player.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So I had decades of playing piano in touring bands and studying jazz in college and music composition in college. And
was jazz the primary performing vehicle that you were doing? Jazz bands?
Jazz and rock and experimental and funky Latin DC go-go funk.
Okay.
Yeah. I was really
crazy.
really all over the place, and it was a lot of fun and for a number of years, and then I just got tired of it. I think I had like 6 flights in a week, and then I was flying in and doing like a recording session for somebody. I was an engineer, and then like I had to drive to New Orleans and play Jazz Fest, and then we flew to Colorado, and at what I can't remember the timeline exactly, but I just remember that I was just tired.
Just a dizzying
I was just
sequence.
completely overwhelmed with playing music professionally, and so I jumped ship, and I holed up in a cabin in the mountains in Colorado and ski bummed the rest of the winter, which was on my bucket list to do. I always wanted to spend a whole season just skiing every day.
Just kind of checked out.
I was just like, I'm out.
The grind.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, and I was like, I thought I was gonna. So anyway, I was hitchhiking to the mountain one day, and the ride in Colorado, like if you have a snowboard and you're walking, people will pick you up because they know where you're going. It's really different than like hitchhiking in the Midwest.
It's not too secret.
Yeah. So I told this person my story of being a musician. You know, music is my life, and that I was just burnt out, and I don't know what to do. And he said these words to me. It was really fascinating. He said, "Didn't your daddy ever tell you to do your second favorite thing for a living?" I was like, "Oh my God, that would have been, that's brilliant." You know,
that is brilliant, and mine didn't either. Yeah. So let's hash this out.
Yeah. So he didn't. So I went to. I was like, oh yeah, I like vintage motorcycles. So I went to Harley school and became a Harley tech, and then worked for motorcycle companies, small and dealerships, for a while, and I just put music down except for listening to music. I just wasn't doing it for a number of years, but it was empty. It wasn't happening for me. Like, not having music in my life was not working. So
needed it more than you thought, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
And how many years ago is this that we're talking about?
10.
Okay.
Yeah, probably about 10 years ago now. So I was living in Wimberley, Texas, outside of Austin, and I usually, when I wake up in the morning, say coffee. Coffee is usually my first word when I wake up. And one day, for no explicable reason, when I woke up, I said, I'm going to buy a banjo today.
Interesting.
Yeah, just for real, this is what happened. I woke up and I was like, I'm going to buy a banjo today. I don't know if it was my dream.
You had some sort of divine...
I hadn't been contemplating it at all. You know, I'd been listening to traditional music, but I hadn't been contemplating playing it at all.
Wow.
And so, like, I made a pot of coffee, got dressed, drove into Austin. And
Still did the coffee first, though.
Absolutely.
So your second favorite thing that day as well.
Drove into Austin and bought a banjo.
And what was it? And what did you think you were going to do with it?
Well, what had happened was, it was a very cheap banjo. It wasn't inexpensive, but it turned out to be not a very good banjo.
All right.
It didn't really matter. It was also my first foray into tinkering and disassembling and changing things, and which we could talk about later. Banjos being sort of the musician equivalent of, you know, Tinker Toys or Legos or something,
or a Harley bike that you
exactly.
can modify.
Yeah, exactly. It's more machine than. But anyway, so what I did was I got the banjo, and I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew that I liked the Stanley Brothers. Mm-hmm. So I went home and I bought all of the early Stanley Brothers. I think it's Mercury, so somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. The early recordings of the Stanley Brothers, and then I just started putting it in the slowdowner on the computer and writing tabs. Like no lessons. Okay. I was just like, where are these notes? It was like...
Had you ever even played a stringed instrument before?
Like the sound was so terrible, but I was just like, well, it's that note, and I know it's got to be there. Yes, so I had years and years of electric guitar as a teenager.
Okay.
So
you knew about tab, and you knew how it worked.
I knew about tab. I knew how to make tone with my fingers and frets. Let's rewind to there just to tie it all together. When I was 5, my parents put me in piano lessons. So I started music early at 5. Reading music, understanding music, and then when I hit the 4th grade, I started playing cello.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
there's some history going on, yeah.
And then when I hit the 7th grade, I wanted to play piano in the jazz band. So I mustered my courage and went up to the crazy jazz teacher after school and said, I want to play piano in the jazz band. And he said, spot's filled, kid. And I was like, dang it. And then he said, wait a minute, you play the cello? And I said, yep. And he said, hang on a second. And he went into his office and he came out and he handed me a black Hondo 2 electric bass and Melbay bass book 1. And he said, learn this and you got a gig, kid.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So I started playing bass in the 7th grade jazz band, which quickly escalated to me needing a guitar. So I was a young guitar shredder in junior high and high school.
Yeah, excellent.
So back to the banjo now. I did have stringed instrument background.
Cool.
So I knew what to do with it, but I didn't know anything about what to do with the banjo.
You just heard this sludgy Ralph Stanley picking
as
creeping
slow
by.
as possible,
like
just marking the notes, writing the tab out, and then after I had tab it out, I would sit there and just go note by note with my 3 fingers and my picks on, trying to make sense of it. So,
are you able to demonstrate any of those early? Do you still know any of that early Stanley stuff?
Yeah, I bet I could. Like the way. Let's see if I can play it. It's the morning. I think there's some sort of banjo union law about not picking a note before noon. Yeah, so the one I remember best. And then later, is a little his break to Little Maggie.
Little Maggie, right?
Yeah, and I think he was capoed up to 5. He was either capoed up to 4 and they were in B, but because of the recording pitch, pitch, it pushed it up to C, or they recorded it in C. I'm not sure which.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. But so I learned it at capo 5.
Oh, crazy.
And took it apart. So
where'd you go from there? You start just sponging up banjo music, or where else did you go? Because someone like me who more or less comes from like a bluegrass, newgrass background, you've ended up somewhere that's more like, it's finger style, but it's more like Ozark, old timey.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
That happened because I can't leave anything alone. With music, I always, creativity is the core of it. And so, at this point, I like to say, there's as many banjo styles as there are banjo players.
Yeah, there really are.
There's no such thing as banjo law, and so you just start eking out your own way. After where I went after at the very beginning was I just started taking stuff apart. I got really into Tony Trishka's stuff. He put out this great album on Folkways, and I can't believe I think it's called Territory.
There is one called
with
Territory.
Mike Seeger appears on that album. It was one of Mike Seeger's last recordings, and Pete Seeger appears on that album. They do Leatherwing Bat. So there were all these old school legends on that album. It's just a gorgeous album.
Yeah.
And I started transcribing and learning that stuff. And then that led me to Mike Seeger, which led me to the New Lost City Ramblers, which led me to so much amazing history of early American music that he and John Cohen and Tom Paley curated,
So what do you think it was about those styles that really caught your ear and made you go that way instead of maybe, I don't know, Trishka's other stuff or Bela Fleck or somewhere else that you maybe could have gone?
For lack of a better word, the primitivism. I love things that are raw, that have stink, that have a weird pocket. Like, what is that? That's deep and compelling. It's not polished. It doesn't sound like it translates to modern ears, but when you put it on, it just gets you. So I think
some sort of authenticity that it has.
Yeah, I'm afraid of that word. Just but for a number of reasons, because like that can lead you down to the line of like birthright to play traditional music, or like it can lead you down all sorts of paths. But all sorts of for realism.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll call it for realism.
Yeah.
I'm a for realist. Like, you can just tell that it's what it is. It's organic, and it's through. And then I quickly realized, from having a jazz background where you can descend into chromaticism anytime you want, you can modulate things around, and you can play a wrong note and play it again and convince people that
it was intentional.
Yeah, exactly. In traditional country music, you cannot do that. There is nowhere to hide. Like, if you don't play something that's consonant and placed well in time, it's gonna just jump out at you. And so there's this amazing challenge. Albert King said the hardest kind of music to play is simple music, and the blues is simple music. But like, simple music is not simple, and it is some of the most challenging music to play. And so I think,
like you said, there's nowhere to hide with simple music. It exposes you.
Exactly.
And Albert King playing blues was very exposed, and he killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I was drawn to that approach,
Do you have any advice for, or maybe just share what your approach was to ensure that you played with that, what'd you call it, for realism? Yeah,
for realism.
How do you hold yourself accountable to that sort of?
Well, I have a mantra that is from John Hartford, and I think it's in the middle of, because he would sort of sing words monotone and say fascinating things.
Yeah.
I think it's on Speed of the Old Longbow on Rebel Raid. He says, "Play your tune to suit yourself, then you're as good as anybody else." And I just, when I heard that, I was like, whoa, that's what it is,
Just play the music that you want to hear.
Yeah.
And
play it your way. It's it's interesting because you have to have a certain discipline when you practice music. You have to learn how to learn,
Sure.
So I think you have to be honest with yourself about what you sound like. And I remember another thing a teacher said in Spanish class way back when, and she was like, you don't get to coin new words unless you're completely fluent in a language. You can't just make up new words. So respecting and understanding the people that did stuff before you, and listen, dive in, take it apart, but then also allow yourself to play things a certain way. Look for the essence of a piece of music rather than the specifics of it. And let it flow through you.
What are some elements of your style that you think, or what did you work on to develop your personal style?
What I did was I learned melodies by ear, and then I figured out how to put them into a roll of some sort. Either claw hammer or 2-finger thumb lead, index lead. Oh, so we can get technical here with the Ralph Stanley thing and the Earl Scruggs thing, because I learned a bunch of Scruggs stuff too. Because this really gets to the heart of the matter. Is Scruggs was a thumb lead player. Thumb lead. Melodies on the thumb, beats are on the thumb.
Yeah.
Ralph Stanley was an index lead player.
Yeah.
And he melody on the index, beat on the index. And so from learning Ralph stuff and then learning Earl stuff, I ended up putting that together by I would just pick out a melody first, understand what the chords were behind it, and then figure out how to create some form of rhythmic roll around that after the fact. Melody first, then the roll. So what happened was sometimes I would play melody off the index finger, sometimes I would play melody off the thumb, and it was always a matter of convenience. If the melody was up on the first string, I would play melody off the index finger, because if you're playing melody on the first string off the thumb, you're gonna in a roll you're gonna end up
twisting around,
or you're gonna end up double picking the string. So if I was to give a 2-finger thing, like if I play it on the second string, this is a thumb lead, simple melody, right? So, but if I took that thumb lead over to the first string and played that same thing, then you end up double picking a string, and you're not. So in order to solve that, because I loved all sorts of the Clawhammer stuff and Kentucky upstroke, I loved that sound, and like that first string is the most convenient with downstrokes. The first string is the most convenient string to get melody off of. Yeah. So what I did was I just inverted it. So now we're playing. Actually, the way I do it now is the lead is off my middle finger. So that's middle, index, thumb, middle, index, thumb. But it's still in a bummed. So I got to where I would just unconsciously be able to switch back and forth between thumb lead and index lead, like sort of at will, just because I was always practicing playing the melody first, and then the roll starts to become like a practiced habit. It's hard to explain a little bit. But.
Yeah, it almost has to be reverse engineered in a way, or something like that.
Yeah. And well, it has, because I'm a music educator. I have reverse engineered it. I've distilled it down to teachable and explainable principles. But when I was learning it, I wasn't explaining it to myself. I was just.
So let's go there for a second, because I was explaining to a student yesterday, that's sort of the thing with banjo, is how to like take this melody that you want to play and figure out how to not disguise it, but integrate it into these rolls in a way that is like hip and cool sounding, but also gives you that melody. Like that's the whole puzzle about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is your advice when you've deconstructed it for students of how to approach doing that? Right.
Well, first let's talk about tab for a second in the response to this. Tablature is very useful if you just need to know how it works, when you're just trying to figure out how to get into the banjo and understand how it works. But tab falls short once you get past that moment, because now you have a whole bunch of roll notes and melody notes all written on a page with the same gravity. Yeah. So when you look at a page, you have roll notes and melody notes, and you don't know which are which. So what happens is you start playing it very slowly, and then as you get it up to tempo, the melody starts to emerge. Mm-hmm. And this is completely backwards from how anyone ever played the banjo ever, as far as traditional banjo goes. You find the melody and you put some rhythm around it.
Yeah.
So what happens is you end up with tab slaves. So essentially you end up with people that are like, well, I can play, I don't know, what's that song? I'll Fly Away. I can play I'll Fly Away really good the same way over and over again. Uh-huh. And then after that, I don't know what to do with it, So I saw that a lot. I saw that happen to me too, with tab. I was like, well, how do I start to branch out from this? So which leads back to why I switched over to find the melody first, and then hunt for ways to put it into a role.
The Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Deering Banjos, who want you to know that banjo teachers love good times. In a recent survey conducted by Deering, over 200 banjo teachers were asked, how likely is it that you would recommend the good time banjo to your students? An overwhelming 85% responded that they would, with the number one reason being that good times are easy to play. Even Good Time Ambassador and 2019 IBMA Banjo Player of the Year Kristen Scott Benson agrees that you will not find a better banjo than this in the price range of the Deering Good Time. With the Good Time banjos, Deering understands the importance of starting out with a banjo that will help, not hinder, your banjo learning experience, which is why they make sure that each and every Good Time banjo leaves looking great, feeling great, and sounding great. For more information and to see exclusive videos from Good Time ambassadors Kristen Scott Benson and Pete Wernick, head over to deeringbanjos.com/teacherslovegoodtimes. Yeah, so like I'll Fly Away, for example. I guess this kind of segues into another question, is something that fascinates me about how you play is you do seem to go between, you might do a 3-finger style that actually resembles really bluegrassy stuff. You might do a 2-finger style that resembles other older styles, and you got some claw hammer going. And is there a way that you decide the best way to approach? I don't know, we could use I'll Fly Away as an example or something, but
well, some of it I decide mysteriously, just like all creative endeavors. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm digging on what I'm doing with that, just because you just stumble across it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing about music, is you spend time with music until you have ideas, or spend time with music until you have something that you really care about. So, but yeah, I'm not sure how I make those decisions. Honestly, some of it has to do with how my partner Betse Ellis feels about what I'm playing on something. Sure. If it's something for concert, we both, have really in-depth dialogue about what works and what doesn't. And
to what degree are you a purist in terms of looking at where the song comes from and maybe trying to play it in a style that's closer to whatever your source is for playing it? Does that factor into? Absolutely.
I would say all degrees. Mm-hmm. Being like from absolutely respecting your source and digging into source material to all the way to let's just do it how we do it. Mm-hmm. Like the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean, your source is everything, Mm-hmm. We don't ever, if we're doing traditional music, an old tune or an old song, ever just say, well, I learned it at a jam, so let's just do it. We're always like, well, who recorded it? Where did it come from? What region did it come from? Let's learn about it. Let's listen to because tunes, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but I will say it quickly. Tunes homogenize in jams and in the scene, which is great because it's common ground. We're sharing music, and it's really important. But when you go back to some early sources and see what the earliest recordings and see what they were really doing with it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes to hear how changed it is, how less syncopated it is, how smooth it is, how many extra color notes are in there.
Are you familiar with a banjo player called Sam Guthridge? He's in like the DC area.
No.
He was on the show, and what you're saying almost exactly mirrors his approach. And he's said that when you go back and research a lot of this old music, you hear where bluegrass comes from, but bluegrass did it by taking out a lot of this funkiness, and it's pared it down into this really smooth stuff. And what he enjoys doing is going back and like reincorporating all the stuff that got removed.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you can find when you do that.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for that for realism, or that stink, as I like to call it, I mean, you play like what you listen to. Mm-hmm. Like if you're like a jazz player, if just any instrument, if you constantly listen to Charles Mingus, mm-hmm. you're going to have that stink, that feel, that understanding, that dig for it depth, that really stretchy, interesting pocket that's just so ferociously deep. But, if you listen to Spyro Gyra constantly, you're just going to have some slick elevator music sound to your pocket because it's what you're internalizing.
Sure.
So absolutely going back to the old sources and listening to that music, not just for the specific notes and stuff. Because one of the things to remember about field recordings or kitchen recordings is that a lot of these people were very old when they got recorded.
Yeah.
So if they're scratchy or have some intonation or rhythm things, not all of that is authenticity. Some of it is just that they were 90.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of decipher but at any rate.
I wish I could have heard like Son House in his prime or something like that.
Exactly.
So speaking of what you listen, you playing like what you listen to, how often do you feel your jazz piano history still comes up in your banjo playing?
Oh, plenty. Mostly just because I know music theory.
Okay.
Mostly just because I know what notes do what.
Okay.
That's almost the entirety of how that's applied.
How much do you improvise
a lot
on the banjo?
Quite a bit. Yeah, a lot. It's even if it's not exploratory improvisation, even if it's just in the midst of playing a tune, I like to internalize what I've learned so well that it's fluid, so that like the improvisation may be subtle, mm-hmm. but I'd never just learn a thing one way and just repeat it. I can always offset notes or play a fill. And I consider that a form of improvisation. When you know something so well that you're not locked into playing it a specific way, then you can be free to move around in it. But you're also free to honor that melody. You don't have to, play tritone substitutions or like a chromatic descending echo of the line or whatever. You don't have to do all that stuff to be improvising.
Sure.
Also, just the act of improvisation, there's melody, there's chords, and there's rhythm. And honestly, I'd put rhythm on top. There's rhythm, melody, chords. Especially, here's a piece of advice if you're learning banjo, is get your time together. Get your time together. Like, everybody will forgive some weird notes or not even hitting the right notes at all. But nobody will forgive bad time.
So then the obvious follow-up to that is, how does one do that?
Yeah. Oh, well, first I want to talk about the spectrum of improvisation.
We'll put a pin in that.
Yeah. Well, we're headed there. So we have rhythm, we have melody, and we have chords. So if you learn the melody, mm-hmm. and then you learn how your fiddler likes the piece chorded, assuming you're working with a fiddler. Yeah. But if you learn how the chord form of the song, and then you have some rhythmic approaches to build a pocket or a bed for that song or tune, then what you have is a spectrum of what to play. You can play explicitly melody. You can just play the melody. and hopefully in 2 octaves, so you can learn it low and high.
Yeah.
Then you can play explicitly rhythm and chords. And then you can play some melody, like finish lines or hint at melody while you're playing chords. So you have an entire spectrum to move back and forth on at all times.
Yeah.
And just being free to do that and relating that to your emotion and the spirit of the tune and the performance, just moving around on that spectrum is a powerful act of improvisation.
Yeah, it really is. That's a real Hartfordy thing too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think that's what he was big on is just constantly swaying between this rhythmic, melodic
and it's
separation or whatever.
Yeah, and it's incredible to listen to and as output, because you just, when you listen to this, well, especially Speed of the Old Longbow, that album from John Hartford, as far as one of the John Hartford String Band fiddle tune albums, that album is just incredible because they created a game where every, I believe, 8 bars, you had options. You could play melody, rhythm, single note, layout. There's a whole bunch of lists of things that you could do every 8 bars.
Yeah.
And every 8 bars, you had to change what you were doing. And so as a result, you have this fiddle tune album, but it's like, it sounds like progressive rock. It shifts in interest.
You couldn't arrange it like that if you wanted to.
No, it would be a life masterwork to actually write out what the arrangements for Speed of the Old Longbow are. But because of putting these parameters in place, they just created music that couldn't have been created any other way.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yep.
So how do you develop
time?
Good rhythm.
Well, I want to say a metronome, but I don't. I do. It is worth it to spend time with a metronome.
Okay. Is that what you did?
I've spent a lot of hours with a metronome over the years. Absolutely. Because I started music lessons at age 5 and I went through college studying music. I just have these inherent practice principles that I adhere to. So
that's like more academic.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily academic. It's just internalized. Like the same way I say coffee in the morning, I say, well, is this rhythm okay? So it's hardwired into me. But I'm also a teacher, so I have to encourage people to work on their time. And one thing that I've been discovering recently is that while people will turn on a metronome while they practice, they will not often stick with it. Like they don't always hear when they're not on metronome. Like it's not the metronome is not enough they haven't developed the discipline to stick to it. So if they make a mistake, they may loop back. And so my solution to this with my students is band in a box. I create rhythm tracks, backing tracks that have the chord form in there to play along with. And you can't cheat.
Right.
You can cheat a metronome. You can just you can mess up.
Go back a few measures or whatever.
Start again. But with the backing track, especially without the melody, you can't cheat. You have to audiate the melody and stick to it, or otherwise you'll get lost and you have to wait till the whole thing comes back around. Or even better, wait till you hear that distinctive 4 chord halfway through the B part and jump in because you know where you're at. So I really,
a more realistic situation. Real life playing.
Yeah. So it trains you in a lot of ways, but it also acts as a metronome even when you don't know it. So I really like, among other things, providing a backing track.
Yeah, I enjoy Band in the Box for that exact reason too. And if nothing else, then it's just a little less annoying to listen to than click, click, click.
Absolutely.
At least you have something that kind of sounds like drums or something.
Yeah. No, I still just go into a room and put on some round the horn 1-4-5 bluegrass thing on Band in a Box and just rip guitar solos for a couple hours.
Man. Yeah,
just cause.
So I only heard this word yesterday, and it's a great word, and you just used it. Define audiate.
Oh, audiate is when you mentally internally. So audiate is the sound equivalent of visualize, essentially. So if you were running a melody in your mind, you're audiating a melody.
Yeah.
You're imagining hearing a piece of music. And intentionally, like not just like abstractly, oh yeah, Toto, Africa, but if you're actually like hearing it in real time, when you're processing a piece of music in time, but internally rather than singing or playing is to audiate.
Yeah, that's a great word. I'd never heard it before.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
Let's talk about your banjos.
Okay.
What do you have? You have two things here. Take us through what these are.
This is Woody, and this is Grandpa's hammer.
Oh, nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
So you have Woody. What is distinctive about Woody, and who made it, and what do you like about it?
I made it. You
did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I built this banjo with the help of Mark Fransky, who's a great builder, and he was one of the original builders for Hawthorne banjos.
Oh, interesting.
But he's especially a great mandolin builder. So
okay,
pretty much I was turned free to build it, and I've taken some lutherie classes and have a background in some of that stuff too. But pretty much he would just stop me if I was about to do something stupid.
Okay.
And other than that, it was just me. So
yeah, cool.
So what this is it's a block rim.
Yeah, I saw it's like a
maple.
multicolored one. It's really really interesting looking.
Yeah, with the walnut tone ring.
And you said it was a black rim with what in maple?
Paduk.
Paduk. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is that similar to like a rosewood or something? What is that?
Yeah,
I've heard of it before, but I don't know. Like
it's a real hardwood. It might be somewhere between rosewood and ebony or something.
Okay,
on that spectrum. It's really interesting because it's like this deep brown, almost kind of purplish, but that's because it oxidizes. If I was to sand through this right now, it would turn like a bright orange red.
Oh,
yeah,
wow!
But then it darkens pretty quickly over.
That must have been
days.
Pretty stunning when it was brand new.
Oh yeah, it's amazing looking. So the reason I call this Woody is because it's a wooden tone ring, block rim, and then all the marquetry, all the inlays that I did are also wood.
Yeah, that inlay is really great.
So this is a flamey kind of maple, and this is these diamonds are also Paduk. I cut those out of Paduk. So all the inlays is woodwork, and then the nautical rose is all the woods that are in the banjo. So Paduk and maple.
And you did all that wood
rosewood.
inlay yourself?
Yes.
That's great.
I did. Mark helped me. I mean, I actually did it, but Mark helped me in that he had a laser cutter. So we drew some of these tiny shapes with the thing, and then laser cut the veneer to get the shapes. And even so, they're so small in the wood grain. What we did was we just made a whole bunch more than we actually needed of all the shapes, and then you still had to cut them out with an X-Acto, and just hold them with tweezers and sand them and stuff. There was this nautical rose here is like just the crowning achievement of
that sounds very tedious.
It was terrifying because anyway, I could go into detail about it, but I won't because I'm more interested in music. But so
is that a normal size head, 11-inch?
Yeah, it's 11.
Oh, I don't know why it looks wider to me for some reason, but
the main point of interest in this banjo is that I set the neck further up.
Okay.
So a lot of times on a banjo, the fingerboard will be sort of flush with the deck. Mm-hmm. But I moved it up so that the fingerboard is above the neck. And you can't see this because this is audio, but up by right where the neck meets the body, I'm running my pinky finger freely under the strings right there. So I have
you got a decent amount of clearance.
A ton of string clearance right where the neck meets the body. So
basically that gives you like a lower left hand action, but a higher right hand action. Is that sort of the thing?
It lets you have a bunch of right hand high action there, but without having to sacrifice action in the left hand. Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
And you really enjoy that wooden tone ring sound?
Yeah. It's plunky. It's just a very sort of different.
And we should also mention that, part of that slightly mellower sound that you're hearing, part of that's the wooden tone ring, but you also have a Renaissance head on there.
Yep.
And you're using plastic finger picks, too, which is unusual for a lot of us, but...
I'm using these Recording King Ivoroid finger picks, and this is a plea to anyone out there in the world. If you have Recording King Ivoroid finger picks, please contact me because they've stopped making these.
Oh no! When?
As of like a year ago, and I'm down to my last set.
Ooh!
But I love these picks, and nobody makes them. I even called Recording King, and they were like, "No, man." So,
there's got to be a bunch out there
I've scoured
somewhere.
eBay somewhere. Some music shop in Alabama has a drawer full of them.
You know it, yeah.
So if anybody has Recording King Ivoroid finger picks, please contact me.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Excellent.
So and back to one of the other things that really defines the tone of this banjo is that I have a no-knot tailpiece on there instead of a breakover tailpiece. So I have less breakover pressure,
right?
Which translates to more low end. A little bit less volume, a little less brightness, but more low end.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's got a really cool versatile sound between all those things. You can really, you could probably play some bluegrass on it if you needed to.
You can get right down the bridge, and it'll still pop.
It'll pop,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, good work. Yeah, that's really cool.
So sort of with a thumb lead style on an old Missouri tune, I might sort of be prone to picking up closer to the neck joint. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are those pretty heavy strings on that?
Very.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, they're very heavy strings. So, yeah.
Like, how heavy are we talking? Like 11s, 12s?
Oh, no. This is, my low string is probably a 26.
Yeah.
I think my first string is a 14. So I think it's like...
A 14?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
14, 16, like 18 or 19, and then a 26 on the low string. And probably a 13 on my fifth string.
Dang.
Like very
That's
heavy.
Beefed up.
Yeah.
How about this other one? What did you say?
Yeah.
Grandpa's Hammer?
Grandpa's Hammer. Pick this up.
And this is the one I got to hear last night. Is that right?
I did play this on stage.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of heavy strings.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now we're going to go really heavy. So, Grandpa's Hammer. This is also a block rim. I've stained it so you can't see the colors, which I'm not sure why I chose to do that, but I kind of wish I hadn't, because this banjo started out life as a $300 Recording King.
Okay.
And then over time, I just kept changing it. I modify it and then make it better. So I took I pulled the frets and I radiused the fingerboard and refretted it with the radius, and then I modified it to where it had 2 coordinator rods instead of 1, and then I found this Pennington block rim, so I turned the block rim down, and because of this neck offset thing, the forward offset thing.
Oh, yeah, you got the same thing going on this one, too.
In order to do that, though, I had to graft a piece of mahogany onto the heel. You can't even tell it's there, but...
Oh, to accommodate that second coordinator rod.
This heel is now like an inch an inch deeper
Oh,
than
wow.
it used to be. Exactly to accommodate the second coordinator rod, but with the
when you move it, when you shift it up, there's no neck there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason and then eventually I cut the headstock to a different shape and did an overlay on it.
Yeah.
So because after a while, I mean, there's nothing
other than the inlay on the fingerboard. There's like nothing recognizable.
Yeah,
about
the
it.
inlay on the fingerboard is the only thing that betrays its former life. But it was never not a banjo. It just kept changing, and then all of a sudden, so I call it Grandpa's hammer because if you inherit your grandpa's hammer and you break the handle and you put a new handle on it, and then you bust the head and you put a new head on it, is it still Grandpa's hammer? So, in some ways, yes, because it started out as Grandpa's hammer and you were working with it and you kept it alive. I mean, who knows how many times Grandpa did that beforehand,
Yeah.
So that's where I came up with
That's hilarious.
this concept of Grandpa's hammer.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So the most obvious difference with this one is that it's low.
It is low.
Yeah, how do you have that tuned? And is that we wanted to touch on this too, the different tunings you use and how you switch between and the skill involved in that.
This is a good place to start with that. Yep.
Okay.
So most of the time this lives in banjo players have multiple ways of confronting the key of D and the key of E. But for me, what I did was I just put really heavy strings on this banjo and tuned it as if it was in standard G tuning, just a fourth lower. So we have A, D, F sharp, A, D.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it ends up sounding kind of similar to like a Seeger long neck, except without a longer neck.
Yeah, I think with long necks, the standard thing is to tune it to E.
Right.
And then, so I have a step below that. But also it's strung with enough string tension that I can actually tune this to C.
Oh, way down.
Yeah, so I can go.
That's cool.
I can go another whole step below where it's at right now. So
give us a demo of what this sounds like. It's really cool.
Let's see here. I gotta think of something to play.
I love that sound. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that Lost Indian?
Dry and Dusty.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah.
But good, another
Great
Ozark
song.
tune. Yep.
Do they sound similar, or am I just way off?
Uh,
I thought the A parts sounded similar.
well, I mean, when you're talking about Lost Indian, like if somebody says you want to play Lost Indian, the obvious response that everyone should make in the whole room in unison is which one? Because it's a case of a different tune, same name. There are many versions of that. So
yeah.
I mean, probably one of the most famous ones is probably the sort of Cherokee Shuffle derived one. That,
I guess that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah,
coming from the bluegrassy world.
Betsy and I play one from Bob Holt, the Ozark fiddler, and it's a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Clarke, the only thing that might be more important than banjos today is lunch.
Oh boy.
And we're running up against it. So,
oh no.
So man, really enjoyed hearing what all your deep banjo philosophies and everything like that. It's really great. But I did want to give a few minutes. Do either of you have questions for Clarke? Anything? We actually have a small but attentive audience here.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, thank you.
Great Lakes Music Camp. So if either of you have anything you're dying to know about,
yeah, shoot, please.
Yeah,
what do you got?
Chime in.
Sure. When you have the deeper strings, you use a crow-spaced bridge to, I don't know, make it bigger so you can actually get to those bigger strings. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Or
it does.
you
It
use
does
the
make sense.
standard, bridge.
Well, I'm sure that I started with a bridge blank and cut the string spacing just to maximize the width of the fingerboard. So as far apart width-wise as I can get the strings here at the edge of the end of the fingerboard is probably where I put those
You made
slots.
the bridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't carve the bridge. I started with the bridge blank without slots in it.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else? Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so
and-
much. It's
well,
been-
yeah, and
it's been a
before- I mean-
blast. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I do want to give you the chance, tell everyone like websites or how to like find your music or find you to come see a show, take a lesson.
Probably the best way to contact me is betsyandclarke.com, BetsyandClarke.com. If you just Google Betsy and Clarke, any random spelling, you'll find our website.
it'll be something.
Yeah,
that
and
pops
also
up.
shortroundstringband.com. Mm-hmm. And I'm really lucky to be in a band with my banjo brother Ryan Spearman, who is so we sometimes do double banjo stuff, but he plays everything as well. And
No one's called the cops yet.
no one's called the cops yet.
Man.
But he was a little plug for his website. He's a great climber teacher, and he's got a website called playbetterbanjo.com.
Oh, I've seen
and
that.
I highly recommend checking that out as well. But Short Round String Band, Betsy.com, BetsyandClarke.com. Shoot me an email, and I do Skype lessons or anything you'd like.
Yeah,
Yep.
great. Well, it's been a pleasure, Clarke. Thanks a lot for
Thank
taking
you
the
so
time.
much. This has been a blast. Yep.
And that's going to be all for this episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast featuring Clarke Wyatt of the duo Betsy and Clarke and also of the Short Round String Band. Special thanks are in order to today's Patreon supporters, Tony Newbolt and Russ Fotava. Go to patreon.com/banjopodcast to learn all about that. There were 2 sound clips that you heard. The first was Noah Came to Eden, recorded by Tony Trishka. The second was Rebel Raid, recorded by the John Hartford String Band. You can contact the show by emailing me at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Other than that, look for me on all the social media sites. Always love interacting with the listeners out there. And I think that's going to do it for me. So I'll get back to work on the next one, and I'll see you then. Over and out.
Over and out.